Welcome, hello and hi my creative friends. Today we're checking out a pencil from a company better known for its paint pens. Our pencil today, and yes, it's definitely a pencil, boasts an oil-rich composition ensuring bold, ultra-vivid hues that apparently glide smoothly without crumbling under pressure. Ooh. From that famous paint pen brand, today I give you a pencil from Posca. Posca! When we say Posca, we don't really think of pencils, do we? Posca is really well known, and while we haven't reviewed them yet, they are very popular and really only famous for one thing. That is, of course, being one of the world's best paint pens. But a pencil? That's slightly different from paint. Posca pencils have been around since 2019, so they're not exactly new. Posca itself is a company created in 1983 and is a subsidiary, don't we love that word, subsidiary, of the giant Japanese stationery company Uni Mitsubishi, which we also know as Uni or Uniball. They make a whole lot of stuff. I guess in expanding the Posca range with these pencils, Posca is doing what a lot of very specialized art brands seem to be doing nowadays, which is to leverage off their good name and reputation with a whole heap of other stuff. But just because they say Posca, do they live up to the quality and reputation the paint pens have? Today, we're going to do what we always do and throw a series of tests to answer that very question and see if these pencils are actually any good. First up, let's check out the design of the Posca pencil. This is the Posca Pencil 36 pack. What you're noticing straight away is it comes wrapped inside very thick, clear packaging. Also, for the first time ever in this section, let's have a listen to something. Well, we will talk about that in a second. First though, let's jump over to the Posca site. When you find the pencil section, they have quite a bit of information about the pencil range, but it does appear the 36 is the only kit they offer. So there's not a huge amount of colors in the Posca pencils. Interestingly, there is also something fairly easy to miss here. If you click on multi-surface, apparently the Posca work on more than just paper. They can be used on wood, fabric, glass, and a lot more. For a pencil, that's actually quite different. Back to our 36 kit here. Let me just take that plastic off. I think pencil companies do this for transport and travel security, but it always feels like a bit of a waste of plastic to me, as I'm never going to stick them back in it. It sort of also does make them feel a bit cheap. Oh, now this is different. What is this? It's like a piece of elastic. Not sure why. Oh, okay. This will make sense. Let's start with that plastic cover. On the rear, we have details of the pencils, including the colors included. It does look like all the numbering on this is a bit all over the place. This elastic, it's just that, an elastic band, and I figured out what it's for. It goes around our pencils, like so, to keep them all together. And we are keeping them all together because this is actually 3 trays and a lid. Very different. That lid is what we could see through the cover. It has a deep, rich picture, 2 clear zones to see the pencils, branding being Posca Pencil, not pencils, and a mini swatch on the cover. If we take it off, we have 1, 2, 3 trays of pencils. These trays are separated tonally, and you can see if I take a pencil out, there are formed dividers here. The trays feel very strong and very rigid, but that massive gap up the top is what we were hearing before with our pencil shaking around. Gaps like this aren't great. If pencils move around a lot, often I find that when they arrive, there's a very good chance they'll arrive with broken cores. Let's hope that's not the case here. Let's check out the Poscas a little closer. This is the Posca Pencil Colored Pencil. It's a slightly thicker feeling, very dark charcoal grey, almost black barrel with very little branding on it. Texturally, it feels very pleasant to touch. Interestingly, and I guess not surprisingly, its design and stylings are just as striking and very similar to a Posca paint pen. The pencil is an average length of just over 175 millimeters, and it feels quite solid, coming in at fractionally under 8 millimeters in width. The core of the pencils is a blend of oil and wax, which isn't uncommon for modern pencils, but it's unusual for a brand not to pick a side. And the barrel is made of incensed cedar wood. From tip to tail, we have a double-sided pencil. The first side has a pre-sharpened tip, lots of black paint, the word Uni, followed by a bright Posca, and the word pencil, and a large colourful swatch. The other side of the pencil is very bare, with white branding for the Mitsubishi Pencil Co. Limited. That colour swatched end is rounded, with interestingly and surprisingly, the pencil's colour code included on it. Posca pencils are quite fun. This is one of the more surprising packets of pencils I think I've opened in a while. It took me a little bit to figure out what exactly this elastic was for and what the overall idea was here with this packaging. With the way this is designed, it looks like you're either going to make sure you always use this elastic or plan on keeping your pencils in this plastic packaging. So I guess until you figure out what you want to do, you're likely not going to want to throw this little guy away. The packaging is a nice touch, but as it's a little loose around the pencils, I think there's a very high chance that you'll get some internal breakages on these, particularly if you order it by mail, which I did. Shipping is not known to be gentle, and with that shake, that's not super great for any pencil brand. The pencils themselves are a little bit thicker than usual, but actually feel really light in your hand. I really like the look of them. It's different, and the dark coloring with that super vibrant swatch is very striking, which looks really cool and modern. Design-wise, they do really channel the look the Posca paint pens have, which is great to see. Now, the number on the swatch base is a little bit weird, and it may be a little bit too much style over substance, as it's actually really easy to miss when you open them. I like it, and it's great to have pencil numbers, but it's a bit of a strange place to put them. All right, cool looks aside. Let's get into the details and do some testing. For our first test today, I'm very curious to see how they handle. When you think Posca, you think saturation and vibrancy, so let's see if they're going to live up to that name. Let's start our saturation and vibrancy test today with, of course, a little bit of swatching. 36 colours isn't a huge amount of colour in this range, but we have them all, so let's see what colours the Posca can produce. There isn't a swatch in this kit, so I think I'm going to have to keep things simple and swatch these based upon the order they have on the rear of the packaging. The numbers aren't consecutive and are a little bit all over the place, so hopefully they're in some sort of order. This paper is of course just our standard generic 140 GSM mixed multimedia paper. We've started at 1, which is a white as usual, and so far, it's an interesting pencil. As I'm laying these down, I'm finding they've got quite an interesting texture. Very soft, it feels a little bit like using a Prismacolor, but unlike the Prismacolors, I am having to push quite hard to get a good amount of that pigment onto our paper. And as you can see, for that pressure, they aren't as super saturated as I'd expect. The colors do seem bright at this stage, and some of these colors are gorgeous, but some of them really feel to be misnamed. 46 Ivory is much more of a yellow than I'd call an ivory, and number 4 Orange is definitely a red rather than that. 11 Fuchsia is another one that I'd say is a lovely color, but not pink enough to be what I call fuchsia. I am loving the blue green and emerald green, and I think overall, for the 36 being such a small kit, they've got a good variety of colors here. I am finding the case is a little annoying already though, because of how deep it is. I'm finding every time I put a pencil back, it almost drops in, and I'm a little bit worried that I'll break them by letting them whack too hard. Anyway, initial thoughts are that the pencils feel very comfortable in my hand. Really light though. I'm not sure if this will help or hinder as we go along. That was our swatching. Before we chat about it and get too into our colors here, let's check out that second part of our saturation and vibrancy test, the one with the scale. What we're doing is picking 4 colors from this kit plus our dominant black and white and measuring the pigment put down at 5 different pressures. 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 200 grams, and 400 grams. So light to heavy. As that pressure builds up, hopefully the pencil should become more and more saturated, which will show us just how consistent and predictable this saturation is. Let's go get started. The pencils I've chosen today are red, 15 red, green, 6 green, blue, 33 blue, yellow, 2 yellow, white, 1 white, and black, 24 black. Let's start, as always, with our red pencil at 25 grams. There is quite a surprising amount of saturation coming down at such low pressure. For oil pencils, this is a little more than I'd expect, but as Posca states, it's a blend of oil and wax. It's more of what I'd expect from wax. Interestingly though, the red, green, blue, yellow, and now black seem very consistent in colour put down. Onto the 50 grams. I think we're getting a real doubling here at the 50 grams from our 25 grams. The green is following exactly the same, as is the blue. I think that yellow is much more than a doubling, but that black remains pretty consistent with the rest, with a nice doubling. Our 100 grams is going down nicely. The red, green, blue, yellow, and now black are very consistent, but I'm not quite sure they have doubled from that 50 grams. With the 200 grams, we are definitely starting to get burnishing into our paper, but it is getting a little difficult to control at this level. The red, green, and now blue has doubled nicely, but I think that yellow has more than doubled. The black has doubled nicely. Our final weight, the heaviest at 400 grams. We are getting a massive amount of burnishing here with all our colours. We're almost at pastel levels of burnishing with these. I am also continuing to struggle here to hold my weight at the 400 gram level. I sort of feel like they're bouncing around a bit. That said, pretty much all our colours are a doubling from the 200 grams. Onto our white on the black cardboard. 25 grams is going down very well. It's fairly similar to our colours. The 50 grams is a nice step up, so too is the 100 grams. We're again getting a little bit of burnishing at that 200 grams, which at 400 grams is very strong. Very similar steps here to the colours. I'm not sure what I was quite expecting here. The saturation and vibrancy with these pencils is fine, but I was expecting much more muchness from these pencils, and they just kind of haven't given it to me. The colours are fine, just not as poppy as I'd expected. They also seem to really burnish the page really very easily, and I'm not sure how this will go with our blending, but I guess we'll see. In terms of our colour range available, it's not too bad for a 36 kit. There's not a huge amount of blues and purples, but we do have a couple of okay skin tones and some greys, which is always great to see. The naming for a lot of these colours is a little bit off. The names Posca has given them don't always match what I'd say are the actual colours. Orange is a perfect example here. What they call orange is a red, and what they call bright orange is just straight plain old everyday orange. Consistency-wise, they have actually done extremely well. They are a little bit too saturated at the 25 grams here, but otherwise with each step up in saturation, they remained overall pretty consistent. I did find with the weights climbing that it was a bit difficult to keep these pencils where I wanted them to be. At the higher weights, they just sort of jumped around, making it hard to control. Okay, so let's give these pencils a grade for saturation and vibrancy using our scale of A to F, with S being superb. Let's give the Posca a really solid B. Very consistent, but not as vibrant as I'd expect. On to the next test, which is our single pencil gradient test. This is of course a very important test for any pencil because it tells us a lot about the characteristics of that pencil and importantly, how much control we have over it. Let's get straight in. Right away with our red, I'm finding these pencils hard to control again. They start off very, very strong and drop through that burnishing heavy weight into a nice mid-range. Interestingly, while the ledge is there, it's not super sharp. When we get into the lighter end, it's still quite saturated. I'm finding the red, green, and now blue are very similar in how they're gradienting. The yellow is quite similar, although it seems to move from that heavy weight into the mid-weight a bit gentler. Our black, which is turning out to be a very nice black, is very consistent with our first three colours. Let's look at that white. Not bad, it's quite dominant and really burnishing strongly at that heavy end, and I think it's a much better, gentler gradient into our lighter end than the colours. There really hasn't been much of a surprise in today's gradients. They have felt and they have performed pretty much exactly like they did in our scale test, which I guess is to be expected. I found I am still struggling quite a lot with our heavier weights when moving through into the lighter end of things. Speaking of that light end, we are still quite saturated and vibrant even at our lowest weight here, which can be a double-edged sword. The big positive is, of course, that the Posca are still pretty consistent overall through all this test, which is great to see. For a very consistent result, but still one lacking a light end, I'm giving the Posca a solid B for the gradient test. It'd be great to have a lighter end and a bit less of a ledge from our high end. Let's blend some pencils. Blending is one of the most important things I look for when picking a pencil set. How easy they blend and how good that blend actually is really important. A good blend takes your art from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Let's see how the Poscas feel and handle with their blending. Our first part of our blending test is our stock standard blending two colors together. What I'm doing here is gradienting down with our first color, which is as always a red, and then gradienting up with our green to see how well they mix together. As the colors cross over each other, we're getting a waxy buildup and a bit of a mix of colors happening. It's not great, but there's a little bit of purpley brown coming through. Onto our blue and yellow. Because yellow is very translucent, this is often a much more impressive test. The blue is down and we're starting up on the yellow. Interestingly, we are getting a mix, but it's more of a splotchy layering effect than any real blending here. It's a green, but a really poor, unappealing green. I suspect our white's going to have a big difference here. On to our next test, which is a transitional blend between two analogous colors. This time it's our red and yellow. As I'm gradienting back and forth here between both colors, you can really see these pencils struggling. The pigment just isn't combining. Each gradient is just laying on top of each other. Let's try the green and blue. I think the darker colors are helping to hide it a bit, but we're really having the same issue as with the red and yellow. Not a great blend. Finally, let's try a more advanced blend with the green and yellow in a sphere. Both these colors are the lightest here today, so they usually work really well together. Unfortunately though, I'm getting a very similar result here with our transitional blends. A lot of this color is really just sitting on top of each other and not mixing. Well, let's be honest, these pencils haven't blended very well. In filming these videos, we've certainly seen pencils on this channel that are actually much worse than these, but also a lot more that are much better. Looking at how thick that pigment is and how quickly we burnish these pencils, I thought we'd have much easier and much better blend here. All of our tests here have had the same problem. The pigment just sits on top of itself and doesn't combine. Hopefully the next test fixes that. Using our scale, I'm going to have to grade them a C- for our blending test. Not the best blend we've had. For this test, I'm aiming to check out exactly what this white pencil can do. Our white today has felt really very consistent with all of our other pencils across all of our tests, which is usually great. But I'm hoping that it can help compensate for some of those areas the Posca has struggled in, including blending. The white can often be a saving grace to make that blend just a little bit more usable. What we're going to do is use those blending tests that we prepared earlier and bring our white pencil in to lay it over the top of the primary colors. How will the white pencil change and lighten the already drawn colors? Will it burnish? Will it blend? Will it do anything at all? Let's bring our white in straight over the top of our first blend. That is a really bright white, much brighter than I thought it would be, but it is massively improving our blend. It's very much acting like a blending stick. The same thing is happening with our blue and yellow. It's taking away all that splotchy look and combining our colors. It's not a great color though, as it's lightening it way too much. In our transitional blend between red and orange, it's having a similar effect to the blue and yellow. It is helping with the blend, but that white is so dominant, it's completely washing it out. Same thing with the green and blue. That's almost now green, white, and blue. Finally, the sphere. It's interestingly taking away any gradienting that we had between the two colors. I think it's actually made the difference between the green and the yellow stronger. Okay, looking at our results from all of our other tests, I don't think this white is actually super strong. But when it combines and blends with our colors here, their interaction is so strong, it's actually completely taking over. It's a really interesting combination. I think definitely these pencils would work really well using something that is harder, less opaque for a blending stick for blending, but definitely not this white. This one's great for highlights, but everything else, it's just way too much to be usable. For a white that's pretty unusable with this pencil kit, I'm giving the Poscas a D in the white factor. This may work fine for other kits, but not the Posca. For this test, we check out how accurate these pencil barrels are to the colour they actually put down on the paper. This is a really important test because unless we know a kit really well, the swatch is the only way we can pick the colours we actually want. How I'm going to be doing this test is simple. I'm bringing in the pencil barrel and I'm putting it next to the gradient that we created earlier. This test is always a little bit more difficult with pencils that don't have the full colour along the barrel, but as the Posca have burnished so heavily at the top end, it's a little easier to see. Our red is quite badly off. The swatch is much darker than the pigment. The green is closer, but still very similar to that red. The blue is close, a bit better than the red and green, but again, there's quite a bit of difference. The yellow isn't bad, probably the best of our primary colours, but off quite a bit. The black is surprisingly the best, but again, not as perfect as we'd like to see. Unfortunately, the colours of our swatches here are not as good as I would have hoped. All our primary colours are quite badly off. The red is probably the worst of the lot, but the green and blue are pretty close. That yellow's okay, but even the black, which is the best of them, isn't perfect. Which is a real shame, as something like this feels like it should be an easy fix for Posca. For a slightly disappointing colour accuracy test, I'm giving the Posca a C. It'd be nice to have a bit better accuracy here. It's time for the break factor, the test where we break some pencils and we learn some fun facts about them in a scientific-ish sort of way. What we're looking for here is to see how hard or soft these pencils are, but also to see how consistent the manufacturing of the Posca is. I've got high hopes for these today for our Posca, because even though they have struggled a bit in some areas, they have done really well with consistency. So, do the Posca have a consistent mix in their core to get a similar snapping point every single time? Let's find out. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a super fine point that will break immediately. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. Starting with our red pencil as always and setting it up. On with our pressure now. 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 7, 800, 1 kilogram and snap. 1,047 grams. Quite a respectable weight for our red. Onto our green and let's take that tip off. Setting it up with our angle and the pressure is on. 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 and snap. 939 grams. Quite close to our red. Onto our blue. The red, green and blue have felt fairly similar through all of these tests today, so let's see if the blue continues that trend. Let's put that pressure on. 300, 4, 5, 6, 700, 800, 900, 1 kilogram and snap. 1,102 grams. Keeping up that consistency with the red and green. Onto our yellow. I say it every time because it's more translucent. I always assume it'll be weaker. Let's see. Setting it up and our pressure is on. 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1 kilogram, 1,100 and snap. 1,105 grams. Almost exactly the same as our green. Onto our black. This has been quite a nice black through all of our tests today. As far as blacks go, it's been quite, well, black. We are set up and the numbers are climbing. 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1 kilogram and snap. 1,122 grams. Onto our final pencil, our white. This has been an interesting white today. Not super strong on some tests, but really dominant with the blending. Let's see if it's hard or soft. We're set up and the weight is on. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and snap. 960 grams, very close to our other pencils. And that was the break factor. The Posca have done pretty well overall. They aren't perfect, but they have remained across the board quite consistent with each other, which has really kept them in line with all of our other tests. Our weakest pencil was surprisingly the green at 939 grams, and our highest breakpoint is the black at 1,122 grams. If we average all of these numbers out, we get a score of 1,045. If we have a look at the scale, 1,045 slots them in right here, just above last week's Woomer and below the Kalor and Arteza. It's really interesting where we look at that break score and what's around it, as a lot of these pencils, the Woomer, Kalor, Arteza, and now the Posca, have felt really very similar in a lot of these tests. They are all relatively new pencils, and maybe there's something similar that newer pencils put in their course mix to get these similarities. Who knows? Perhaps this needs more investigation. Anyway, for quite a decent consistency in our break scores, but a difference of 183 grams between our high and our low score, I'm giving the Posca a score of a B+ for the break factor. Quite consistent and quite strong overall. It's time for our last test, the joy factor. Do these pencils spark joy or do they cause despair? This test is where we do some arting to see what these pencils can do, and we chat about my personal opinion, which I've formed across all of these tests. Do the Posca Colored Pencils spark joy? As always, I try to pick some art that suits the pencil range, and as always, I struggle. This is the third attempt I've made, and that's not because of the pencils. It's just because I get an idea in my head and realize it won't work with the limitations of the range we've discovered. So today, I've decided to do a cute little grumpy gnome in his little gnome home, just because. Hopefully it'll work. Let's start at the start. The look of these pencils. They're pretty, they look cool, and they look modern. Black pencils are always gonna stand out, and the black with the super poppy swatches even more so. Something that takes a lot of getting used to is the rear color code. If I wasn't filming these tests, I doubt I would have noticed it. It's not a deal breaker, but simply an annoyance as it's hard to see. And honestly, it's just not super useful being there. The packaging is, I think, style over substance. From the perspective of a design on paper, the idea and look is great. But when you actually get to using it, it just kind of feels a bit janky and sort of clunky to use. I know they're trying to push boundaries here, but it just sort of hasn't worked for them. The trays are too deep to easily get your pencils out of, and the space they can slide around in is slightly scary. I haven't had more than a normal amount of breakage with the Posca today, but so much room to shake around means if they aren't breaking, the point is always going to be flattened off by the movement, which isn't great. Test-wise, they've done pretty average overall. The saturation test and the gradient test were okay, but it all sort of went downhill from there. I had such high hopes for these pencils because I love the Posca brand. They just haven't performed as well as I'd have liked, particularly in the blending side of things, which was very rough. I've been trying to improve that blending here with this art, and while I'm still struggling with our blending techniques, I'm finding if I use layering, our blending of colors is massively improved. We don't usually talk layering here. There's only so much we can do to test pencils, and I just figured 30 minutes plus is way too long for a video already, but should we test layering? Let me know in the comments. We can make these 40-minute videos. Anyway, when I'm adding the lighter colors over the top of the darker ones, it seems to be combining those really dark saturated colors much nicer, and I'm almost able to add highlights at the same time. I am having to plan where I want to put each color much more than I would normally, as there is definitely a limit to how many passes I can make before things get muddy. But that's okay, just something to be aware of. As I've been wrapping up this review, I've been thinking about that random, almost hidden section on the Posca site. Do the Posca pencils actually work on those other surfaces? Paper, wood, fabric, glass, and more? So here's a tiny test within a test. And yes, it does. Look at that. It works extremely well on glass, stone, wood, plastic, and acrylic paint. Works very well, actually, and it surprises me that Posca doesn't make more of a fact that they do this. It's actually a big sell for mixed multimedia artists, as not all pencils combine well with all surfaces. For me, the discovery that they work very easily on top of acrylic and acrylic gouache makes them much more valuable, which is great because it's actually really tricky to find a pencil that will draw well over those thicker, oilier mediums. So that's a nice surprise. Let me know if you guys have used them there, anything else in the comments. As we're getting closer to the end of this piece, I'm finding to get the detail I want, I'm not a realism girl, but I'd like a decent amount of detail in this piece. I'm sharpening my pencils a lot to keep the fine point. Pretty much every time I change color, I'm sharpening. These don't hold a fine point for long, but they aren't terrible. This is a bit of a rambly joy factor today, but before we end, we should chat price. The Posca for a 36 pencil kit aren't super cheap. We're looking at about $80 Australian for this kit, or $50 US. This comes out at about $2.22 Australian per pencil, which puts them almost into the premium pencil price range. I guess as we're ending our little gnome picture here, he's very cranky and very cute. That brings us to the burning question. Do the Posca pencils spark joy? Sadly today, I have to say no. The Posca pencils don't spark joy for me. While our artwork has turned out pretty cute, these pencils just felt pretty average throughout today's tests. So I think you can understand why that is. For how they've performed, they also seem pretty expensive, but it is only just a no though. I think since finding out about their ability to draw well over other mediums, their joy got pumped up a scooch, and I think if you had need for a pencil to use on any other medium than straight paper, then you may actually have much more joy with them than I do. It's not a common pencil characteristic, so it may be just what you're looking for. But for me, for how they handle as straight pencils, it's not enough to push them into my joy realm today. So for today's joy factor, the Posca pencils receive a C for my joy. Setting them in right here. The last thing we're going to do today is class our Posca and give them a final overall score. So, how would we class these pencils? Student, hobbyist, or professional? These are quite decent pencils with a lot of positives, but they are definitely not professional. I think for colouring and big block art where blending isn't super important, you'd really love these, so that of course leaves hobbyist. And that puts them right in here with other excellent hobbyist pencils. We've had a lot of pencils that are quite similar lately, and while they've all been fitting quite nicely into hobbyist, they do feel more like colouring pencils than I guess anything else. What do you guys think? Should we add another classification here? One for adult colouring? Let me know in the comments below. Before we finish up, let's give the Posca an overall final score. What I'm going to do is take all of the scores they've had across all of our tests today and average them. So for our final overall score for the Posca Colored Pencils, they receive a C+. Well done, Posca. If we put them on our big scale, they go right up here. That's it, everybody. Thank you very much for watching along today, and I hope you, like me, has learnt a little bit about the Posca pencils. What do you guys think? Are they the right pencil for you? Do you use them, and are they your go-to pencil for weird surfaces? Let me know in the comments below. Now, I've stuck a link below if you want to buy your own set of Poscas. Every little click helps a tiny bit. Next time, we're checking out something that has just been released that took me forever to get into the country. The very exciting, very new Ohuhu Halawa colored pencils. I haven't opened the box yet, but I am super excited to see if they live up to our Ohuhu name. Until then, however, if you want more of my face in your face, have a little look at the links below. We also have a very active Discord that you can sign up for, and if you want to chat, come hang out with us on Twitch. I'm there most days. That's it for now, everyone. Have a brilliant day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.